Okay. Thank you for joining us for the online. Let me just check and see. Yeah, we are going. Thank you for joining us for the online marketing webinar series, Social Customer Service. We're grateful to have Sarah Cornelisse from Penn State Extension joining us as today's instructor. We greatly appreciate the support that's provided by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture and the Southern Risk Management Education Center to help make this series possible. To help report the impact of this webinar to these agencies, I would like to ask the participants to complete a very brief online evaluation of the session at the end. The link to the evaluation was included in the email with the link to join the session, and I will post it in the chat box for you at the end of the session. Just a few housekeeping items. Please leave your microphones on mute and video off during the session. And if you would now locate the chat box, if you would please type your name and location into the box to help me record attendance, that would be very helpful. You may use the chat box at any time during the session to submit a question. And we are recording the session and we plan to post it online in the event that you'd like to view it again or share it with someone else. And Sarah, if you would change to the second slide. Thank you. We know that people with written goals are significantly more successful than people without. And I want to encourage you to jot some goals about how you can use this information down during the session. And I'll be watching the chat box as we go and relaying those comments or questions to Sarah. If there are no questions at this time, let's dive into social customer service.
All right, thanks, Hal. Very happy to be here this afternoon, or this morning, I guess, for you guys there in the central time zone, and to talk about social customer service, because with the rise of social media use by businesses and how readily social media has been adopted by consumers, this is a really important aspect of social media use that I think all businesses need to be aware of and be on top of. So, as we know, there are numerous reasons people and businesses use social media, but today we're going to focus on the customer service aspect. And I have a quote up here from a fruit grower and farm market in Pennsylvania. And as this quote indicates, the value of social media is really in the conversation and engagement that it facilitates. So we want people to talk about your business or your products and services, and wanting them to do that automatically means that you're implicitly agreeing to provide social service because of just the definition of social media is that back and forth conversation. However, not all of this conversation that occurs will be positive, unfortunately, and how you react and address any negativity is important, and that's going to be a large part of what I cover today. And reaction to any criticism or complaints may be a defining moment for your business. So having a customer service plan in place will really help you be prepared for those moments. But first, let's take a quick look at some stats regarding social media customer service. First one is that about 67% of consumers have used a company's social media site for servicing. And this was a 2013 study. So I imagine that those numbers, or that number, has probably increased somewhat over time. A more recent study in 2018 indicates that about 45% of consumers head to social media first when they have a question or an issue. So that's the first place they turn is to Facebook, Twitter, whatever their social media platform of choice is, to first communicate with the business. They're not going to call, they're not going to email, they're going to go to social media. And then back to a little bit more dated information, but it has some breakdowns that I think are valuable. This study in 2012, 47% of social media users engage in customer service activities on social media platforms, 70% of those on a monthly basis. So while the percentage of customers using social media for customer service is not 100%, those who are really relying on it heavily. So it's a repeat form. It's not something they just do once. I mean, that's their main go-to. 30% of those prefer social over the phone. And if you just think about our mobile phones in general, how do we use them? Very rarely do we see people actually holding them up and using them as, as a phone. And it's a lot more texting and use of applications. And of the social media sites, Facebook was the most likely to be used for social customer service. And I think that's understandable given the penetration of Facebook amongst consumers in the United States. A couple more stats. 88% of respondents would be less likely to do business with someone who didn't answer questions on social media. So these get to a little bit more of what's the importance of customer service on social media. Can you, as a business, accept or be okay with the fact that you might lose customers? Is that something that your business can handle from a financial perspective if you're losing customers simply because you didn't answer a question on Facebook? 21% would be are more likely to buy from businesses that they can reach on social media. So not only by responding on social media are you preventing the loss of business, but then they are more likely to buy from you because they can reach you. So there's a benefit there that you can take advantage of. So just some key points, to hit before I get started in more of the details. We want to focus on the social interaction as a differentiator for your business. This is something that you can take advantage of, and play it up that you are reachable, that your customers can communicate with you on social media. Use that to differentiate yourself from other businesses in your industry, in your area, wherever your competition is. And take advantage of all feedback and comments. So as you'll see later in the presentation, I do spend a bit of time on criticism, but take advantage of the positive comments that you receive as well, because you can take that information and input it into your planning and your marketing and really build upon those strengths. So the three main issues in social customer service that I'll hit upon today is first, response time. Response time is key. Second is having a plan for responses. And thirdly is understanding the purpose that consumers have for connecting with you for social customer service via social media. And that will be embedded within my slides on developing the response plan. So just to start out here again, some top 5 reasons that people reach out to businesses on social media is number 1, they have a question to ask you. Okay. Second, there's an issue with a product or service. And I think that's typically what we think of, those 2 reasons there, as customer service, right? They have a question, there's an issue, they want to get in touch with me to solve those, to get an answer to solve that issue. But I think the next three reasons here, praise for a product or service, or comments about either an online experience or an offline experience, we have to remember that those fall into that customer service category. So they may just have a comment, but it may open up an opportunity for you to provide them with, some servicing of, whether it has to do with a purchase that they made, or, just providing some additional information that it's not couched as a question, but by just going that extra step with them, it will help. So why do people leave reviews for local businesses? So, and this is, this is couched as reviews as opposed to questions or complaints. And I think when we think of review sites, we think of sites like Yelp, where people just kind of share their perspective of a business with other consumers. But these sites are really important for the businesses as well to look at and be aware of. And you can see from this graph that it's really polarized. So here in the blue, I guess the darker blue, I don't know if I can, there we go. Leave my laser pointer here. You can see folks will leave a review either when the experience that they had was really good or really bad. So that's 33% of respondents. 25% will only leave a review when they had a really good experience. And only 5% will leave a review when the experience was really bad. So there's a potential there that we're losing a lot of really good information because of this polarized sort of perspective that people take, of sharing comments when things are either really good or really bad. To get to response times, there are some different expectations we have, or that consumers have, for response times when they're communicating with businesses on social media. So the consumer expectation here we can see on the left is that they're going to get a response within 4 hours. Unfortunately, some research has shown that the average response time can go up to 10 hours. And so think about this. If somebody has a question for a business and they contact them on social media, but they don't hear back for 10 hours, what's the likelihood that that person has moved on, perhaps gone to another business that they had also asked the same question of and got a quick response from, or that other business had the information that answered that question in a readily accessible format on their social media page? So we'll look at some stats, some more stats on that in a couple of slides. So that just sets some general guidelines there regarding expectations of response times. Breaking it down, so that last slide said the average was 4 hours, but that can be broken down more into different time periods, and that's shown here on this graph, where we see about 42% of consumers expect a response in under 1 hour. So 9% want within 5 minutes, 11% within 15 minutes, and so on. But 42% within under 1 hour. And if the expectation is within 4 hours, half of those people want really in 1 hour. And we've seen large companies, they've gone to dedicating social media having dedicated social media departments that monitor and respond to customer service comments and complaints for exactly this reason. So, you know, Hershey Foods, all airlines, you know, think of your large businesses, they have dedicated customer service departments. And Facebook has provided users with information on how quickly businesses respond to just private messages, not post comments. So if you go to Facebook and look at the About section for a business, on a business page, you can see the same information that I'm sharing here on the screen. And so I've got 3 businesses that I follow, and I can see that, you know, this one here in the top left, they'll reply within a day. One on the bottom left, in about an hour, which is, you know, remember that's 42% of consumers expect it within an hour. But this farm on the right, they will respond within minutes. So they're doing something to ensure that they're learning about those messages as soon as they come in, and they prioritize responding to those messages. And kind of to wrap up the stat section here, what's the cost to a business if a consumer is not responded to on social media? And so this study found that you know, the highest percentage of consumers are more likely to go to a competitor. So as a business, if you're not being responsive, you're losing business to your competition. There was a graphic on a previous slide that said 80% of consumers valued the experience that they had with a business more highly than the product itself. And so that's, I think, really important to understand. So you can have a really great product, but if you're not providing that experience, and customer service is part of that experience, you're going to lose your customers to the competition if they're providing that higher quality experience. So, and just to point out, this 14%, you know, this is what we don't want to happen. Absolutely, is that they then go on to post negative comments and feedback on social media, because then that will not only, you know, you not only have lost that customer most likely, but you potentially lost other customers as a result of them seeing those comments. Okay. So what do we need to do now that we understand some of these expectations regarding response times and the impact of not responding? So we want to develop a social media customer service response plan. And this is a slightly modified graphic of the social media strategy development process that I covered a couple months ago in a previous webinar. But this same process can be applied when developing a customer response plan, in my opinion. And the first step or phase in that process is to listen and research the different platforms. So just like when you develop the strategy for your use of social media, and everybody did that, right? You want to make sure that you spend time listening and researching the different platforms from a customer service perspective to ensure that you know the differences in how each of these platforms is used when it comes to customer service. For instance, question asking may be more prevalent on some platforms, while reviews and general comments are more prevalent on other platforms. And you combine that with the demographic use of the platforms and the information for the demographics of your customers, and it can really help guide you in developing this response plan. Let's see here. Okay. So in 2014, there was a survey of consumers on what platforms they expect businesses to have a presence on. And so this was the expectation. You can see the yellow X I've crossed out. Google Plus, that platform has gone away in the time since, actually just recently this month, I believe. And so there's really, no longer an expectation for a business to be on Google Plus. But, with all these different social media platforms, we can see here on the right the age groups that have an expectation that a business be present on that platform. And I think we, since these are 2014 numbers, we can expect that the expectation, the percentages have increased, especially for Instagram here, amongst the younger demographics, that 18 to 29 year group, I think is certainly higher than the approximately 55% we have on this chart. So, to just be aware of where consumers expect you to have a presence and may be looking to interact with you for customer service. Now, this slide illustrates the percentage of customers who use and prefer each of the different types of communication channels when communicating with businesses. I'll get my pointer again here. And the solid color, I'll just use the mobile app here up in the upper left. The solid color, in this case 72%, is the percentage of customers who use the communication channel, while the hashed line, here that I have my laser over now, 31%, is the percentage of the generation that prefers the use of each of that channel. So if we look at social media, since that's the topic for today, if we can see here at the bottom, 52% of millennials, Gen Z generation, prefers to use social media to communicate with a business. 86% will use social media to communicate with a business, but 52% of those millennials and Gen Zers prefer social media. And that's compared with, only 14% of our baby boomers and 29% of our Gen Xers who prefer to use social media to communicate with a business. So think about this in regards to what your customer target market is. Okay, who are those customers of yours, and what might their expectations be and their preferences be? So remember, it's not always what you prefer when it comes to customer service, it's what the customer prefers. So part of the listening and research phase also includes setting up methods to monitor conversations about your business that are not taking place on social media. So tools such as Google Alerts and the use of review sites can allow you to keep tabs on these conversations. While review sites are not always considered social media, I think when it comes to customer service, I would group them with Facebook and Twitter and the other social media platforms, especially because it can be easy for customers to share from these sites, the review sites, to social media, right? Because it's really easy to take a screenshot of something on a review site and then post it to social media, and then it gets shared. And so if you can monitor what's going on in these other sites, that's going to help you out in your customer service efforts. So, I just have a simple screenshot of the process to setting up a Google Alert. This is a business that I'm familiar with up in New York, and I can keep track of it, pretty easy. It's, 5 questions, and I'll be fed information about whenever that business is mentioned online. On Yelp, this just shows, how you can, how easy it is to find a business on Yelp. And if I was the owner again of this business, you know, I can claim this business, which I would want to do. And by claiming the business, you can see here I've circled it in green at the bottom. You then have the ability to respond to customer reviews and messages. Okay, if you haven't claimed this business, you don't have that ability to respond with your customers. And that can be really important, because if you're not responding, they can then share that on social media. So after kind of doing this research and listening phase, next step is to identify your goals and objectives. And this slide shows it within the context of a social media strategy, where a goal might be to improve customer service. Okay, and then you could go on to develop some specific objectives for customer service. And so this is just an example here where somebody might want to respond to emails, or we could change this to Facebook messages within an hour, right? Because that 1 hour period is really important on social media. And they have, they've identified the percentage of messages they want to respond to within that 1 hour, and then within 6 hours, and what they're willing to let they feel is acceptable to go over 24 hours. So set some objectives for yourself to start out with, and then you can come back and analyze how well you're doing and make some changes there. So now let's take a look at the different types of interactions that you will possibly face on social media. The first type here on the left is a compliment, and that's what we hope all customer interactions will be. Unfortunately, we know that's unlikely, and that there's going to be some other less positive interactions that take place. The second type of interaction is a question. And usually questions are pretty straightforward and on topic. However, they can be tricky. Many of us have probably seen questions that have been asked for the purpose of provocation, or to kind of trap somebody. And so once in a while, you'll run into those. And so you should be prepared with how those will be handled. And then finally, the third type of interaction, and this is the last type that we want to encounter, is this customer complaint, or even worse, an attack. However, how you handle these interactions can be defining moments for your business. So having that well thought through response plan can ease some of the anxiety that you may experience when that complaint or attack is lobbed at you on social media, because they can start to feel very personal when you're attacked. But if you have a plan, it will, you know how you're going to respond, kind of lessens that anxiety. So in thinking about a social media response plan, start thinking about who is going to respond. Many of us have, are just 1 or 2 person operations. You're very limited perhaps in, your options to who is to respond. And it may be that it's you, because that's all there is. But if you have some choices, you may want to think about what's a chain of command here. Is there a social media manager for your business who's managing the content for you? Are they the correct person to respond to questions or complaints or attacks? They may not be. They may be just the person who's good with social media and knows the technology. So if they're not the person, who do they go to? What's that chain of command? Is it based on the content of a question or a complaint, or does it automatically go to a certain person? Maybe there's a person who is just has the right personality for customer service, and usually it's somebody who's good at customer service in person. Can you put them in charge of the social media customer service? So how quickly will you respond? We'll hit on this again, but we've talked about it a lot already. So think about how quickly you respond to different types of questions or comments, different times of the year perhaps. What are your expectations for how quickly you will get responses out there? What will you respond to? Okay, not everything will be response worthy. When do you take an issue offline? And I'm not spending a lot of time on these right now because I'll hit on them again later in a little bit. Will there be any sort of documentation necessary for responding to things? Sometimes you may require that somebody provide you some evidence, especially if something's gone wrong. So back to the expected response times, broken down a little bit differently this time by platform. And so I found some data that shows Facebook, an expectation is within 6 hours. 85% have an expectation within 6 hours. I imagine that if you were to look at that more closely, break it down, a very large percentage of that 85% is still going to fall within that 1 hour time frame. But 85% within 6 hours. Unfortunately, the average time is a little over a day. So, and then on Twitter, there's, we're back to this 1 hour. 64% expect a response within 1 hour, but the average time is even longer than what is on Facebook. It's almost a day and a half. And so, you want to try to get yourself in line with what the expectations are, not with the averages. Okay, so we're going to move into kind of some tips for responding, and I know this is probably what everybody's been waiting for. So starting out at the top here, tips for responding. First thing is, you want to leave both positive and negative comments. Okay. You can actually do more damage to your business if you remove negative comments or attacks. This was, I think, when social media was first gaining steam, this was a more common question about what businesses should do, and I think we saw more deletions of negative comments than we see now. But I think it's worth mentioning. You may, however, want to, remove abusive. So there does come there is a threshold where you may say, you know what, this is really abusive or inappropriate, and you really do have to remove that. But you certainly don't want that to be the case with everything that isn't a positive comment. However, if you're going to do that, you may want to put a disclaimer within the About You section of your social media profile. And so I have a couple of examples here. Penn State Alumni Association and Starbucks. You can see I've pulled out the part of the About Us that talks about, if there's negative or inappropriate, offensive, abusive content posted to their, in this case, Facebook pages, that they are going to delete it. Okay. And so, there may be certain words or phrases that are really offensive to you. And you say, you know what, I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to delete it. But you want to make sure that's upfront known to your followers, and so that you've got something to fall back on if it gets questioned. So, Hal, are there questions come in? I see like a little orange thing that pops up every once in a while.
I'm not seeing any.
Okay.
I don't know what you're seeing. This orange is popping up. Sarah, I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to check. Okay, so back to the kind of tips for responding. So after you've kind of determined whether it's something that a comment that falls into something that should be removed, which is going to be a very, very minimal number of posts. You then want to kind of take some time, sit back, listen. What type of interaction is this going to be? So you remember we had the 3 types of interactions: compliment, question, or complaint, attack. So usually it's pretty easy to figure out which type it is, but sometimes it may not be. If it's a complaint, we're going to talk about what type of complaint is this and what type of complainer is this, because then you've got some different ways to handle those depending on what kind of category of type of complaint and type of complainer it is. So, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So, but first I want to, let's see here, I'll show you an example of both a question and a compliment, because this is what we hope for most of the things, and it's really the easiest type of 2 types of interactions to deal with. So here we have a post from the Vermont Country Store, and it shows both a compliment down here at the bottom as well as a question. At this point in time, if you look at the timestamps, it's really kind of difficult to determine how they did with the response times because it was 2 years ago. I went back and found this post from 2 years ago. But you can see that they did respond, both to a couple of compliments as well as to this question here at the top. One of the things that they did that I haven't gotten to yet is that they used the individual posters' names in their responses. So here I'm kind of highlighting one. So we have Monica that asked a question, and in their response, they individualized their response to Monica. So they, that they're looking at her question specifically. It's not this canned answer that they have ready to copy and paste. Okay, but they're really looking at the context of the post or the question when they develop their response. And same down here with the compliment. So Carol posted this compliment, and when the Vermont Country Store responded, they addressed their response to Carol. Okay, kind of getting into kind of a criticism example here. And this one I just wanted to show, point out the response time aspect of this, is that this criticism or complaint came in at 10:36, and the response from the farm was at 10:59, so less than 30 minutes. And the Jones family farm here had responded to the person that was making a complaint. We'll address some other aspects of responding to a complaint in a little bit, but really the response time is what I wanted to point out there. So next step, and I do know that we haven't quite gotten to what type of complaint and type of complainer yet, but we will get there. But once you've determined that, you want to ask any questions that are necessary. Maybe you need to follow up. Maybe you need to ask for some proof or documentation about their complaint or about their question. And then perhaps you need to spend some time gathering some information internally so that you can respond. And then finally, you want to respond. And as I pointed out with the one example from the Vermont Country Store, use the names of the people commenting and posting in your responses. Okay, so now let's talk specifically a little bit about the types of complainers and complaints and how to respond to criticisms. So I think there are 5 types of complainers we have here. You can categorize them into 5 groups. First, we have the meek customer. This is a person who doesn't really like to complain, but will do so on Facebook or Twitter when they feel like they've been pushed to the edge. And so what they're really looking for is some sort of reassurance and to know that they've been heard. And so a really easy solution for them is simply to say that you're sorry, okay? Because they just want to make sure that you're hearing them. They're not necessarily looking for a solution. Then we have the aggressive customer. This is somebody who's really vocal with their complaints, and you should deal with them by addressing them quickly and efficiently. And if you do so, they will become a strong advocate for you. So, you can ask questions like, what else? What else is bothering you? How else can I help you? Perhaps take the conversation offline, but then, come back and share that resolution online. Then you have the high roller type customer with their complaints. This is the person who expects the best and will pay for it. I think, as we deal and interact with people in person, we kind of have to figure out who these people are. And sometimes you can kind of carry that over on the social media. So they're really quite reasonable until they kind of get to the point where, maybe they're crossing over into the aggressive customer category, and people can change categories. But the way to deal with a high roller customer is to have a results-driven solution. They want to know how you're going to fix their problem. So again, as with the previous category, have some solutions ready. Be prepared to take that discussion offline. Then you have the opportunist customer, and I'm sure we're all familiar with somebody who falls into this category. They are the person who will complain with the goal to win something extra, and they're not really looking for a resolution. They're looking for something free, right? So you want to remain objective, use data to back up all your responses, and ask what they want if you're told that your first response isn't good enough, okay? Because they won't always outright openly ask for what they're looking for. They're looking for you to offer it, but you typically don't want to set a precedent for offering free things to complainers. And then finally, you have the chronic complainer customer. This is somebody who complains all the time, but if you deal with them positively, the customer can still be a good advocate for your business. I describe this as kind of your negative Nancy type of person. Just their personality falls into that negative Nancy category. So what you want to do is listen to them, stay positive. Again, perhaps take the conversation offline if it can't, be settled positively in a quick manner. So those are the 5 types of complainers. Now let's take a look at 4 categories of complaints. And we'll take a closer look at each of these 4 types of complaints with some examples. So the first type of complaint is a straight problem. And this is where the customer can pinpoint the problem up front. Okay, so we have an example here. And these are, for the most case, not non-agricultural examples, but I chose them because they illustrated the type of complaint well. So this person complains on Twitter and Facebook, it looks like, and said, hey, I haven't gotten my order, and I was supposed to have it today and they didn't get it. And so Zappos responds, they offer a solution, but the customer comes back and pinpoints the problem with that solution, right? And Zappos then is able to step in and say, we can make this work for you. So they're detailed with what their problem is. They're not just making a generalized complaint. And and saying that the delivery service is poor. They're saying, here's this exact issue with the delivery. So we all kind of like a straight problem, right? Because it's you know what it is, you know how to solve it, hopefully. The next type of complaint is constructive criticism, and I see I'm kind of running short on time, so I may speed this up a little bit. And this is where the customer describes how something can be improved, and you really want to pay attention to this, right? Because people appreciate if you respond back that you've heard them and you say, okay, I really appreciate the fact that you've pointed out something that I could improve, and thank you for doing that. Then we have what's called a merited attack complaint. So this is when the business you've done something wrong and somebody is angry about it, right? And so it's a legitimate attack or complaint about something that you've done wrong, and there's no questioning that you've done something wrong. So in this example, the quality of the food was bad when these folks visited the brew house, and they let the business know about it, and the brew house responded and asked for some more details, and then also took the conversation offline, right? Because they're going to probably make an offer of some sort to make up for it. They know they were wrong, but they're going to do that offline. And finally, what we all really want to avoid, especially in animal agriculture, is trolls. Unfortunately, you usually get one of these. Every business gets one experience with these, I think. And this is where the person is just posting to get a reaction or to make the business look bad. And so this post was actually made by a dairy farm talking about how they were caring for a calf on a cold night, and somebody just jumped in and made this comment that I pulled out, questioning how would they have cared about the calf so much if it had been a male calf, okay? And, I think for those involved in the animal agriculture, you can identify this pretty quickly as that's somebody just looking to troll the dairy farm. Unfortunately, the post ended up being shared by Pearson Farm Brothers, which got a lot of views, and ultimately the post was deleted. Probably a little more negativity on their Facebook page than what they were looking for. So anyway, the challenge here with the complaints and the complainers is matching these up. So are you able to identify the type of complainer and the complaint that you're dealing with, and match up, what you're being faced with and how best to respond, okay? It's not always straightforward. And then how you and another person view a complaint may differ. So if you get somebody else involved from your business in terms of looking at these complaints, you're going to have some different perspectives, and it may be helpful, which actually leads me to my first tip for responding to criticism, and that's to step back before you post the response. Take some time, because it's very easy when you're just faced with a keyboard and a monitor to fire off a response without really stepping back and thinking about it. You get fired up and you just want to write something, and you really need to step back. So you may want to get a third person to read the complaint or the criticism to get another perspective, help you draft that response, or perhaps just step back and wait and see if any other followers step in to address the question or complaint, depending on what it is, and how you feel, the type of complaint and the type of complainer, who you think that is. You want to respond to most comments and criticisms. You used to say that you wanted to respond to everything. However, that's really not feasible in real life. And especially when it comes to positive comments, those positive interactions, compliments. You know, I think there's, you know, if you just simply like them, you know, that's good. You don't have to write out an individual response to all the compliments, but try your best to respond to as many as you can. You want to write unique responses to each person, as I highlighted in a previous example. And if you're only able to respond to a few, especially complaints, if they're complaints about the same type of thing, you may want to explain frequently why you're not responding to all comments, or create a separate post on the situation. And I actually have an example of this. I think last year, Chobani changed something with their product packaging, and they ended up getting a lot of customer complaints about the same issue because of the new container design. And it actually got to the point where they couldn't respond individually to each complaint. So they started responding to people in groups. And so, let's see here. Oh, no. I thought I had that, but I guess it's not in this screenshot, but they did respond to folks in groups. They were naming them individually, but just in one response, so group responses. And then on Twitter, they drafted a mass response. And so we see that here. So they've gotten they recognize that they got the feedback and they're doing something about it. And they ask for private messages so that they can, do something for the consumers that have experienced the problem. So, and another tip for responding to criticism is to thank the person complaining for their feedback. Make them feel valued, that they're being heard, because as we saw with the one type of complainer, that's all that they want. They want, and even for the other types of complainers, it can help with how they view the situation if you thank them for their feedback. It may not solve everything, but it can help. You may want to decide if a conversation should be taken offline. If a back and forth starts to get lengthy, you have to say at some point, let's take this offline, because it's obviously not, the interaction online isn't solving the problem. Perhaps there's certain issues that you automatically want to take offline. Decide on what those criteria are for yourself. Perhaps you need to provide information, and so have some resources ready that you can draw on or go to deal with, to help you deal with responses, or to provide additional information in your response to a criticism. Especially if they're kind of complaints that come up perhaps annually or about a certain topic, be prepared. And then, apologize if it's necessary. There's the saying that the customer is always right. They may not always be right, but when they are, let them know and apologize. And for those situations where you need to come up with a resolution, follow up, especially if that interaction has gone offline. Go back online and follow up with the resolution, so that folks who go to your social media and see perhaps the initial back and forth, they can see that it actually did get to a resolution. Okay. I just have a couple examples here which I will skip in the interest of time, but they'll be in the PowerPoints that Hal or somebody will post for you. And just a couple more slides here. One thing that I found that I think is really great for having a social media response plan is to have this sort of chart that outlines, what the process is going to be to responding to the different categories of interactions. And so here at the top, we've got the complaint, we've got the attack, and you see how it moves down and says, okay, we're always going to say, for instance, and I know this is small on your screen, but they say, we're always going to say we're sorry. And then they're going to, you know, at the minimum, they're going to say, thank you for your comments. They may then, you know, ask for more details so that they have the things that they're always going to do, things that they may do depending on the context of the complaint or the attack. And then there's some examples that somebody that, you know, could step in and refer to if they're not sure of how to respond. Okay. And then they even say, you know, it's even shows how they're going to respond to questions and compliments. Okay, so because even though compliments, you know, you think are pretty easy, you should still have a plan for how to respond to them so that they don't get forgotten. So you don't want people to think that their compliments are falling on deaf ears. And then finally, you want to measure how you're doing. So after some period of time, maybe 6 months, 9 months, a year, go back to what you originally set out as your objectives for customer service, and then you know, determine how you did. So here, you know, this is again this example from before with the actual responses. So they didn't quite hit their objective of responding to messages within an hour's time frame. But they, for what their goal was for messages that went over 24 hours, they were pretty darn close. So they've got a little bit of work to do to shorten that response time frame, but at least they're not letting it go too long. So how do people feel when they get a response, when a business responds to them? You know, 75% are going to share that with their network. 25% of people are less likely to go to a competitor, and they're less likely to post negative things about the business or the service or the product. And then I think you just increase brand loyalty to your business. So you know, by having that positive experience, people are more loyal to your business because they feel valued. So some tips here just to kind of wrap up. You know, be proactive. You'll listen and participate in conversations. You know, you'll be ahead of the curve in knowing what's important and of concern to your customers. You know, focus on social interaction as a competitive differentiator. If you want to bring the same focus on relationships to your online interactions that you may have with in-person interactions. And when you're separated, you know, from your consumers by a computer screen, it's easy to put off replying until it's a more convenient time or to send short clipped responses. But if you really value that, spend the time to develop those interactions online. Okay, and then to define this process and a framework for dealing with your customers. You know, if it's a complaint, understand the complaint before responding. Same thing if it's a question. Follow through on all channels. Don't just put priority on, say, Facebook and ignore Twitter. If, you know, folks are going to be having conversations on Twitter and they have expectations to interact with you, you know, on more than one platform. And finally, follow up after any problems have been solved. So again, that just shows that your customer, that you value them. So thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing this good information with us today. Are there any questions that any of the participants have? I don't see any in the chat box yet, but if you have one, please type that in for us. We hope that everyone will join us next month when we will learn about creating professional videos with your iPhone. And we appreciate you being with us. We ask once again if you will complete the brief online evaluation at https://tiny.utk.edu/webinar-eval. That would help us greatly. Okay, well, I guess that's it for today. Thank you again, Sarah, and thanks to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.